The suburbs have a way of feeling like a stage set once the sun goes down. Everything is too perfect, too quiet, and far too predictable. I lived in house number 12, and Mr. Miller lived in house number 14. We had been neighbors for 5 years. 5 years of polite nods over the lawnmower and brief comments about the weather. But I always felt his eyes. When I was hanging the laundry, when I was washing my car, I could feel the weight of his gaze from behind his screen door. Dear listeners, before I began telling this complicated story of my life, I ask you to support my channel, subscribe, leave a like and write the comment which city you are listening from. This is very important for us, and now enjoy listening. It was a Friday night, and my husband was away on a business trip. The house felt cavernous. I was sitting on my back porch, watching the fireflies, when the silhouette of a man appeared at the edge of my garden. It was Elias, Mr. Miller. He wasn't in his usual gardening clothes. He was wearing a dark sweater that made him blend into the night. The light was on, he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the wooden porch steps. I thought you might be lonely. I should have said I was busy. I should have said I was going to bed. But the silence of the house had been eating at me, and Elias had a presence that was impossible to ignore. I invited him up. He sat on the porch swing, the chain creaking rhythmically, a sound that would haunt my dreams later. He didn't look at the garden. He looked at me. We talked for an hour about nothing, but the air between us was growing thick, like a storm was brewing just out of sight. He started talking about his late wife, about the walls of his house feeling like a prison, and about how he spent his nights watching my windows. He wasn't being creepy. He was being honest in a way that felt dangerous. He moved from the swing to the chair right next to mine. I could smell the scent of pine and rain on him. Do you ever wonder what people say about us, Maya? He asked, his hand resting on the arm of my chair, just inches from mine. Your husband doesn't know what he has, Elias said, his back to me. He turned around, and the look in his eyes was raw. He confessed that for 5 years, he had been living a double life. In the light, he was the helpful neighbor. In the dark, he was a man obsessed. He told me he knew exactly what time I woke up, what music I liked to listen to when I thought no one was home, and exactly how I looked when I was sad. The mosquitoes started biting, so I suggested we move inside. That was my first mistake, or maybe it was the first thing I did right. We sat in my living room, lit only by a small lamp in the corner. Elias didn't sit on the sofa. He walked around the room, touching the frames on the wall, the books on the shelf, as if he were memorizing my life.
Your husband doesn't know what he has, Elias said, his back to me. He turned around, and the look in his eyes was raw. He confessed that for 5 years, he had been living a double life. In the light, he was the helpful neighbor. In the dark, he was a man obsessed. He told me he knew exactly what time I woke up, what music I liked to listen to when I thought no one was home, and exactly how I looked when I was sad. The thumbnail moment happened when he walked over and knelt in front of my chair. He placed his hands on my knees and looked up at me. I didn't come over to talk about the weather, Maya. I came over because I can't spend one more night knowing you're alone and not being the one to hold you. The next 25 minutes of the story are a deep, sensory exploration of the encounter. The narrator should describe the contrast between the familiar surroundings of the living room and the unfamiliar, forbidden touch of the neighbor. Every touch felt like a betrayal and a revelation. Elias didn't move fast. He moved with the patience of a man who had waited half a decade for this moment. He whispered things I had never heard before, words of praise, words of hunger, words that made me forget I had a life outside this room. We weren't just neighbors anymore. We were two people who had stripped away the suburban mask to find something primal and real. In the shadows of the living room, the world outside number 12 and number 14 ceased to exist. There was only the sound of our breathing and the heavy, electric heat between us. When the first light of dawn began to gray the sky, Elias stood at my front door. He looked the same as he always did, calm, collected, the perfect neighbor. But as he leaned in to whisper one last thing into my ear, I knew the bridge had been burned. "See you at the mailbox, Maya," he said with a faint, knowing smirk. He walked across the lawn, his boots leaving dew tracks in the grass, and disappeared into house number 14. I stood in my kitchen, clutching a cold cup of coffee, watching the sun rise over the fence that was supposed to keep us apart. My husband would be home in a few hours. I would have to be the perfect wife. I would have to wave at Elias when he mowed his lawn. But as I looked at the fence, I realized it wasn't a barrier anymore. It was a monument to the secret we now shared. The suburbs were still quiet, but for me, the silence would never be the same again. If you like the video, please like and subscribe my channel.